Review copy provided by Sega of America. It's been 12 years since the original Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games was released. Back then I recall being more excited for the idea of the two characters being in a game together rather than the idea of playing through the Olympic Games. With now 5 games released, the excitement of the duo together has started to worn off, and this 6th entry tackles the fun of playing through these minigames. While normally I wouldn't spend any time speaking about the story of this series, the entry does take the time to write out a story for the campaign. It's roughly 5 hours long, and while it doesn't necessarily phone it in, its writing leaves a lot to be desired. Essentially, an old retro video game console teleports our favorite Mario and Sonic characters back into the 1964 Summer Tokyo Olympics. It's a clever and charming way to integrate both times the Olympics were in Tokyo, while also incorporating the retro and modern games of these two IPs. It's a bit odd to see the 8-bit Mario sprites with the 16-bit Sonic sprites, especially considering that Mario characters have their own 16-bit sprites, but I digress. What I wish was better was the writing. Despite this being the Olympics, a competitive competition, none of these characters really feel like they have a rivalry, and this is Mario and Sonic after all. It's incredibly casual and loses the excitement of having these two IP interact with each other. While it was cool to see the retro versions of these characters interact, the charm of them quickly wore off and the excitement for the series having a story mode quickly died off too. The Mario and Sonic series have always been a collection of minigames themed after the Olympics, with the occasional dream event that mixed up the fantasy world of Mario and Sonic with the Olympic Games. That hasn't really changed in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020. However, something else was added to it, a story mode. For the first time, the Mario and Sonic series features a story mode, one that's roughly 5 hours long and underwhelmingly written as you'd probably expect with this series. Throughout the campaign, Mario and Sonic characters will traverse the districts of Tokyo like Shibuya, Asakusa, and Tokyo City as they compete in events. At the same time, a few characters are transported back into 1964 during the original Tokyo Olympics. If anything, the writing is a good excuse to introduce these new retro-themed minigames. They're themed like classic NES games and are pretty entertaining. I just wish there was more of them. There's well over 20 3D events, but only 10 retro-themed ones. The 3D events are a mix-up of remixed events along with a few new ones that feel more like actual games than minigames. Football, for example, is a full-on game of football, though boiled down to the bare basics. Some of the simpler games like track and field stages have you pressing the right button and control stick combination to land the perfect move. By far my favorite events continue to be the Dream events. These are fantasy-themed games that cross the Olympics with elements of both Mario and Sonic. Dream Race feels like a mix of Sonic Adventure 2's Escape from the City intro, Mario Kart, and, well, racing. Race down on some boards while you grind on rails, perform tricks, and use items to get ahead of your competition. It's a fun concept and addicting to play in practice. This got me excited to play more Dream events, but there's less than 5 in total, and so some of the best parts of this entry don't get as fleshed out as the basic Olympic Games. Most of these games can be played in multiplayer modes either online or locally. Locally works great with up to 4 players at a time between button controls or motion controls if you're playing in 3D. The motion controls are hit or miss though, so I tend to play with buttons instead. A pet peeve of the local multiplayer is not being able to set a playlist to play in a series. Every time I play through an event, which usually lasts around a minute to 2 minutes at most, the game pushes me back to select either a new character or an event. If I select a new event, it fortunately has me reselect my character anyway, so playing a minute-long event forces me to go through about 1 to 3 minutes of loading screens and select options. It quickly became tedious. Online multiplayer works well, but decreases in quality as you add more players. Of course, that's very subjective on everyone's internet connection, but I didn't have the best luck when playing with up to 4 players total. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 isn't a bad looking game. Character models look vibrant and sharp for both Mario and Sonic characters. Furthermore, it's a lot of the landmark Tokyo locations that stand out. Having lived in Tokyo for almost a month last summer, it was astonishing to see parts of Asakusa and Shibuya recreated here. Even the condensed world map recreates some of the smaller districts of Tokyo, like Itabashi and the Emperor's Palace. What doesn't always deliver are the environments of these events. The skate park, for example, looks rather plain like an early Splatoon map in the designing phase. The Dream Shooter event takes place in a lovely looking Japanese temple, though one that feels vastly empty. What I did love was the throwback to the retro characters. Seeing classic Mario and Sonic interact along with their friends was charming and entertaining. I just wish I could get the entire roster to interact. I understand some of these characters weren't in those older games, but I feel like some sprites for them could have been easily recreated or swapped in from the Super Mario Maker game. It's a bit odd to have 2 big mascots in a game and have the music not match the caliber of those 2 series. Especially Sonic. I mean, Sonic's soundtrack is amazing. While that's not to say that the music here is bad, it's just alright. There are a few renditions of classic songs from both Mario and Sonic here for events, but a lot of them aren't the memorable ones. The original music for this title is just alright too, with the main music being a constant loop, with the retro theme stages also using it as a theme, but only now in 8-bit. One touch I did enjoy were the announcers or the commentators for events. Especially on the retro tracks, having the old time feeling of an early 60s radio show over the Olympic Games just felt very fitting. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 isn't a great game, but rather feels like an okay foundation for the series' new direction. It feels like a pivot for the series to redirect towards more story-based content that blends the two worlds beyond just playing the Olympic events. Dream events continue to be the standout games in the series, meshing together two video game worlds in interesting ways. This isn't the entry to win me back into the series, but it's a good first step towards that.